Okay, welcome everybody to the July episode of the Chicagoland SharePoint Users Group. It's a virtual session. It's been going on for a couple of years. It's hosted by MTech Consulting. I am your chairperson, Mark Vogt. Been here for a couple of years. Today we've got a really fun hour, some interesting demos going on with some new guest presenters. Don Miller from BA Insight, Ofer Gal, who is actually a member of the SharePoint Users Group, who volunteered last month, said there's something that he wants to share. That's exactly what we want this user group to be about. Everybody getting together and volunteering to share insights, tips, tricks on old versions of SharePoint, cutting edge new versions of SharePoint, and then we go around talking about all the news and things like that that's going on inside our SharePoint universe and in anything that's ancillary to it. Looking at today's agenda, we're going to be covering typically the SharePoint big picture, 1 or 2 slides to always keep everybody focused on what SharePoint is, what it isn't, tips for how to use it, things like that. There will be SharePoint news and events and Office 365 update from Mike Blumenthal, an MVP now with West Monroe Partners. A SharePoint framework update. Ralph Rivas from Magenic normally covers this. He wasn't able to attend today. I'll be taking his place and showing his slide. We have a brand new guest giving a demonstration on cognitive search capabilities inside Microsoft's AI services. It's entitled Dawgs and Muffins Should Be Fun. That's Don Miller with BA Insight. We've got a tool out there called RESTSharp. It's an API that's available for interacting with .NET Core, and Ofer Gal, our member, is going to be going through it. And then we're going to be trying to leave a considerable amount of time for what's turning out to be a very important segment of the session, which is BYOP, Bring Your Own Problems, where we will open up the microphones and let people actually talk about some of the challenges that they're facing with old SharePoint, with new SharePoint, with on-premise SharePoint, with up in the cloud SharePoint, with things that are ancillary to SharePoint. This is a chance where we can actually get together and talk about problems that you're having and maybe give some guidance on how to get some solutions. Let's dig in. We moved. This group has officially moved from Meetup. As of the move on May, the Chicagoland SharePoint Users Group had over 330 members, but only 50 of them have actually found the new group that's out on LinkedIn. Here's how I need you guys to spread the word. Browse to your LinkedIn page, search for Chicagoland SharePoint Users Group. You will find it in the search results. Hey, we're the only one. Go ahead and join the group and then share those links with friends and colleagues. We need to get our 300 people back. They've lost us, and we were dropped so quickly from Meetup, we were unable to get a message out to the rest of the team, the rest of the members, letting them know what had happened. You're going to see lots of posting on LinkedIn in the next couple of days, even weeks, to try to get those members back so that they know where to find us. Enough said on that. Talking about SharePoint in the big picture, what we always want you to keep in mind is this. The architects and developers in any official IT department are always going to be wildly outnumbered by the users in the organization. What SharePoint exists for is where Microsoft has the ability to empower the power users in your organization. Together, they actually form your effective IT, the official IT people, the architects and developers, and then this unofficial IT, the power users that you identify inside your organization. Don't code the easy stuff. If you're the architects and the developers, there's simply too much of that work, and it's a poor use of your time if you're one of those people. Instead, you want to work on the hard stuff that comes few and not very often. That's the best use of your time. You want to delegate all the easy work to the power users. That's what SharePoint does. It empowers them. All you have to do is teach them the proper ways to actually solve problems, and then you can delegate to them. By empowering those power users, you triple your effective IT in your organization. More importantly, you start addressing all of the needs of your users in a timely fashion, something for you to think about. Another thing that I wanted to share with you is kind of an anecdote. A couple of weeks ago, Mike Blumenthal, another member, one of the MVPs that attends regularly and contributes regularly, actually made the observation that we were not posting in the SharePoint community. I jumped on that reminder. Thank you, Michael, for that. And one thing that I realized is this. Even as I went into the SharePoint community and rejoined, I only see 39,702 members. And we learned back in May that the current statistics in SharePoint are there are 135 million active users. So that even the people that are joining this community, 39,000 plus, call it 40,000, actually represent only a fraction of a percent of the total people in the community, and yet there's a wealth of information here. I want everybody that's in the Chicagoland SharePoint users group to go out of their way to join the tech community and actually start lifting information there about what's going on in SharePoint. I highly recommend that you make the most of your learn time that's available to you on a daily, on a weekly basis, and join that community in addition to getting your regular feed on a monthly basis from the SharePoint, the Chicagoland SharePoint users group. Talking about news and
Mark,
events.
can I add something? Can
Mike,
I add
go
something
ahead.
to that real quick?
Yeah.
Go back to that slide for a second. The Microsoft technical community is where most of the product announcements are posted by Microsoft. So they're now putting, instead of the Office blog on Microsoft.com or on Office.com, a lot of the product announcements are made by the product managers in the technical community as posts here. So you'll see that if you've got admin access to an Office 365 tenant, many of the Message Center message posts refer to additional information, and they'll direct you to a blog post by a Microsoft Product Manager that is actually in Tech Community.
What's the big message here? There's a wealth of information to be found there, and it is turning into the premier knowledge base for SharePoint, is this tech community. You're going to see the Chicagoland SharePoint users group beginning to post its events there in addition to LinkedIn as well. So just keep that in mind. And Mike, thanks for that little tidbit. Turning to SharePoint news and events, as we look at SharePoint, then Office 365, then the SharePoint framework, there was a cumulative update released in July for SharePoint 2013, and here's a link. Everybody that's attending today will have access to this slide deck. You'll be able to pick off the link that's inside there. We learned this month that Microsoft is ending the SharePoint Online public news feeds. They want everybody to shift to Yammer. They want you to shift to other tools than these things that have been called the company feeds for several years. Recently released. This is not really SharePoint, but if you work with SharePoint a lot, you find yourself actually, especially on premise, you're constantly going and using a remote desktop client. Well, now there's a new web client that's available instead of RDC. And you can follow the link to here, and that might end up being a very handy little thing. I've long since, in the last 2 years, shifted over to web-based remote desktops and love it. I haven't been able to get into our SharePoint-related ones, and now that's available. We're also learning this May, June, and even July, Microsoft is becoming very keen on mixed reality in SharePoint. I want people to follow this particular link because mixed reality means that for the first time, SharePoint and SharePoint websites that we've been trying to promote as this metaphor of being like a room that you go in and you collaborate, imagine that it's really actually a room that you're walking in. The metaphor becomes reality, and you're actually working inside the SharePoint environment, but you're seeing it through a mixed reality type of user interface, and it can actually potentially become the room that we've been talking about for 18 years. Microsoft is super keen on this, super invested in this. You can go and check that link out for an article. Microsoft surprised everybody by releasing a new migration tool to get you from on-premise up into the cloud. I'm not sure how WebLogic feels about that. I'm not sure how ShareGate feels about it. Microsoft's offering its own tool. Follow that link up and find out more. This month, there have been some significant improvements in SharePoint Online and OneDrive. They both get some kind of a summer update. Follow that link to find out more. I continue to do more work in Microsoft Planner, that particular application that you can embed inside your Microsoft Teams sites. And what I'll be demonstrating next month is what we've been using for the last few months on an agile approach to managing projects and stuff, leveraging Teams sitting on top of SharePoint and dovetailing in Microsoft Planner. Looking at events coming up, we're in the middle of Inspire. In fact, today's the last day in Las Vegas for the Partner Network. Some of my buddies got to go there, but I didn't get to because I was busy. July is going to see SharePoint Saturday in New York. August is going to be SharePoint Fests in Seattle and in Boston. In the fall, looking farther ahead, we've got Chicago SharePoint Saturday coming up. We'll get more details from them. Ignite is happening in Orlando, and everybody's looking forward to that. And lastly, SharePoint Fest in December. Time to turn over to Michael Blumenthal to talk a little bit about Office 365 news and events. Mike, I'm handing off to you now. It's all yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mark. Let me share that. And can you see my screen?
Yep, looks great.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. I'm Michael Blumenthal. I'm our resident Office Applications and Servers MVP. And I'm going to share with you some Office 365 news from the last month and the last week. But first, I'm going to cover some of the upcoming events, a little different take on it than what Mark had. There is a conference called That Conference, which is in Wisconsin Dells, the beginning of August. And if you are a software developer, it is a great place to be. Not only are there some great sessions and you can learn a lot, but it's one of the very few IT conferences with a family track. So you can actually bring your family with you, and there are sessions and workshops and things for young coders and so forth. So that's that conference at the beginning of August in Wisconsin Dells. Also at the beginning of August, I believe that's the first Thursday in August, is our next Office 365 Adoption User Group. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Microsoft Ignite, as Mark mentioned, is coming in September 24th to 28th. There is also a pre-conference day on the 23rd that will be in Orlando. That event does usually sell out, so if you haven't already booked your tickets for it, I would sign up for that as soon as possible. And there will be plenty of community things to do there. I'm still on the fence as if regarding if I'm going to be going there or not. So I'll have an update for you on that next time.
Okay.
Then looking ahead to December, we have SharePoint Fest Chicago coming to town again, this time for 5 days, up from 4 days in the past. So let's take a little closer look at the Adoption User Group meeting. This is the user group that I co-lead with Rich Skloot, Larry Kuhn, and Joe Baksha. Larry and Joe from Microsoft, Rich is from Blue Cross Blue Shield. Our last meeting, June 7th, we had Caruana Gatimu from Microsoft talk about adopting Microsoft Teams. That was recorded. Her presentation is now in our YouTube channel. So just go to YouTube, search for Office 365 Adoption User Group, and you'll see it on the first page of results. It's Caruana's presentation on Teams.
Cool.
And then the meeting we have on August 2nd, we will be talking about Champions programs. It will be a little different from our usual format. We're going to have more of a roundtable discussion. And there's the short link to our user group. That will be in downtown here at Microsoft's office in the AN building. So please register for that. And tell anyone else interested in Office 365 adoption, again, more from the product management perspective than the development perspective. Please spread the word about that user group as well.
Sure.
Now on to the news. Microsoft made a big announcement recently that Teams is now free for everyone. That is, you don't need an Office 365 subscription to use Teams now. So if you have one, then when you sign into Teams, you're still going to be using your enterprise version of Teams. But if you sign into Teams, you can sign up for a free team using a personal, in other words, not an Office 365 account, but any kind of personal email address. And so this means that Teams is now available to organizations of any size, including very small organizations and individuals who want to use Teams for teamwork, but don't have an Office 365 subscription. Imagine small. Go ahead.
Does this now mean that we have the equivalent of the external user then, that in Microsoft Teams for our organization, we can now start inviting external users like our customers to participate in those project sites that we've created in Microsoft Teams?
Absolutely. So
Perfect.
external users is separate from this announcement. External users has been available for several months.
Yep.
And yes, so you can certainly create a Teams environment, a Microsoft team in your tenancy, and invite external users to it, and they can join either with a Microsoft account or an Office 365 account. And there's a support article out there on guest access to Teams. But this is separate. These teams exist outside of the sort of normal Office 365 tenancy framework, and so there are somewhat feature limited. Think of it as a freemium model. So these are intended to compete with Slack and Slack's free offering. And so they're not quite as fully functional as the teams you get with an Office 365 subscription. There is an upgrade path from one to the other, but again, this really opens it up to small organizations and nonprofits. For example, think of a Cub Scout pack that could benefit from a tool like this.
Sure.
So there's now, as I said, Teams is free and Teams is for everyone. So that was the big announcement just recently with Teams. Again, though, if someone...
I was just saying, good to know.
Yes, and I just want to emphasize one fact, that if you sign into Teams with your Office 365 account, you will get your tenant-based Office Teams experience. It's only when you sign in with a non-Office 365 account that you can sign up for a free team or get into a free team.
Okay.
Let's see. One other thing they announced on the SharePoint and OneDrive front is idle session timeout. So this is a user experience designed to increase security. So if you have your browser window open, you're using SharePoint or OneDrive and you walk away, once you turn this on, people will be logged out after a certain amount of time. So that's a new security feature. Another thing they announced is page approval workflow. So now when you go to publish pages, you have the option to set up a flow-based workflow for your page library, and you can see that user experience here. Like the publishing workflows we had in the past, but now flow-based, and now with the news capabilities and page framework capabilities in SharePoint, you can do the flow-based workflow, and then instead of publishing the page, you'll see submit for approval. And
very
so
interesting.
that button changes. And then the approvers see a task pane and get the approve or reject buttons.
And that's for internal approvals of these pages that are being created, right?
Correct.
Yep.
I suppose,
with all this coolness and the communication sites, Mark is still holding out against hope that Microsoft's going to re-announce that they're going to create public-facing websites again and start promoting them. I know. Continue.
Yeah. No, there's just public-facing websites are such a different functionality set, and if you look at what companies like Sitefinity and Sitecore and the way those are really can be done to address really an end-to-end digital marketing experience that was never on SharePoint's radar. That use case Microsoft has pushed to their partners.
Yep. Don't let me distract you. Continue, please.
Okay. Another little bit they announced is that the hover card for files will now have file usage statistics, so you'll see those showing up. They also announced, and I'm going to say they announced again because they've been talking about this for a while, but this should actually finish arriving at tenants fairly soon. Is LinkedIn profile information showing up on people hover cards in the different Office applications. So especially in Outlook, when you hover over someone, in addition to the profile information and the organizational chart information, you can see their LinkedIn information. This feature is a result of Microsoft's acquisition of LinkedIn a while back. And depending on your tenant, you may have seen this feature for a while, or it may not have arrived yet. So the last tenant I was in, a couple months, or back in May, I changed jobs from the previous tenant I was managing. This feature had already arrived. The tenant I'm in now, the feature has not arrived yet, but will be arriving soon.
That's a really cool feature, Mike.
Yeah, that's AI at
Yes.
work, guys. Yeah.
Yeah, this is especially impactful for salespeople, but in general, it's designed to help you know the people you're
for
meeting.
Dawgs versus Muffins too.
Cool.
Okay.
I will actually be able to leverage that in the discussion today.
Okay, good segue. Let's continue.
Okay, and then the last bit of news is the OneDrive known folder move. So OneDrive is both the cloud storage as well as the sync client. And the sync client runs on Windows and runs on Mac. And on Windows, you've got your couple of specific folders where your OneDrive gets synced and SharePoint sites from SharePoint Online get synced. Well, the known folder move lets you migrate in your desktop folder, your documents folder, and your pictures folder all into OneDrive. So if you've been following the direction that Microsoft has been pushing you as an end user over the last several years, you will be storing any files that you're still storing on your laptop should go in one of these places: desktop, documents, pictures, or your OneDrive that's being synced, or a SharePoint library that's being synced. If everything that you're storing on your laptop is being synced, then your laptop becomes disposable. If your laptop is lost or stolen or destroyed or what have you, you just need to go to another laptop, log in with your enterprise credentials, and you won't have lost any files because everything is constantly syncing, and so you just log back into OneDrive and everything's there. This can be a significant benefit to organizations that are backing up people's laptops. If you're syncing everything, then besides the application configuration, which you can address with Windows Autopilot, and Intune and so forth, there's no longer much point in endpoint backup of laptops if all the files are being synced and stored in the cloud. And so you can actually save a lot of money by getting rid of the endpoint backup.
That makes perfect sense. So you only worry about the files that you're creating get backed up constantly. And I leverage it because I have two laptops. One's my travel laptop, and I never have to worry about whether or not my data is on that laptop because it's up in the cloud. I go get it out of the cloud as I'm working on a client site.
Exactly. And that's the OneDrive story is all about anytime, anywhere, any device access to all your files. So whether it's your laptop, a desktop, or your mobile device, you always have access to the files because they live in the cloud, and it's just your device has access to them.
Cool.
So I'll just quick summary here. There's now a freemium version of Teams. Session timeouts can increase the security of your environment. Page approvals are now possible using modern workflows through Flow. File stats will start appearing on hover cards. LinkedIn info will also start appearing on people hover cards, and known file move is something you should look at. Thank you.
Mike, thanks very much. I'm taking back control, and we'll continue. You guys tell me when you see my screen again.
Good?
Yep.
Good. Moving on to the next one. Just looking around the area in the world of the SharePoint framework. Again, Ralph wasn't able to attend today, but he sent me these notes. 3 real big deals, that's all. A mid-June release of the SharePoint Starter Kit. Could some of you go to mute? I'm hearing some background chatter there. Thanks. There's a SharePoint Starter Kit that I want you guys to take a look at. It's really all about trying to demonstrate what's possible with communication sites. But Ralph thought very highly of it. There's a new webcast about upgrading SharePoint Framework solutions to the new shiny Office 365 command line interface, CLI. For those of you that have been developing with SharePoint for a long time, or even developing period, you're seeing a big, huge push in the last couple of years to go back to command line interfaces, back to consoles where you're typing in commands as opposed to more of a graphical interface. It allows for swift evolution, and in Office 365, there's now a CLI available for that. There's a new dev platform. SharePoint 29 is getting a new shiny dev platform. Ralph is going to be demonstrating that next month, but he wanted to at least give you guys a sneak peek that it is available, because he's going to be diving in on that and on using the MS Graph in the August session. So just wanted to make you aware of that in the SharePoint framework. And we get to spend the rest of our time working on our talking about our presentations. Our next one is Dawgs and Muffins, image processing via Microsoft's AI cognitive services. I hope I got the title and the subtitle correctly. We're welcoming Don Miller from BA Insight today. Don, I'm about to hand off to you. Are you ready?
Yeah, I was the noisy one. My office space is next to the train tracks.
Oh, okay.
And the 128 special just came through, so that was me. With that said,
that was pretty small. Yeah.
Do you guys see my screen?
We can continue, please.
Excellent. Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Don Miller. I work for a company called BA Insight. And that is me and my family right there. And if you want to read a little bit about my bio, it's all there as well. And again, if you go to the BA Insight homepage, about us and our team. The last thing that I'd throw in there about the comment of Inspire is the rumor that I heard just moments ago is that Bruno Mars is playing.
Yeah.
The reason I share that is that if he plays at Ignite, if he plays at Inspire, usually that means the same group plays at Inspire, which is in Orlando, a couple months later. So if you didn't get to see him at Ignite, Inspire, then go see him at Ignite. It should be fun, and obviously Ignite has a lot of good value as well. So the topic that we're going to be talking about is, again, leveraging Microsoft's cognitive services. Again, what I'm going to use instead of what I like to call death by PowerPoint is actually just our website. It'll familiarize a little bit with what we do as we drive towards the Muffins versus Chihuahuas debate. From a customer perspective, plethora of different customers across all different types. But at the end of the day, feel free to go to our website and look at our customers. Now, what we're going to be talking about, and what I thought, again, depending on how today goes, is we are continuing to build out our solution leveraging the Microsoft Cognitive Service Stack. And the one that we're going to be talking about today is the vision component, or at least one of the vision components. If you go to this particular page, you can see all the different services that are available. And again, these are all out-of-the-box services. So essentially, you could actually take this service, connect it up to SharePoint, and as I'll show, be able to actually auto-tag an image when you upload it into SharePoint. That includes Office 365 as well. And what I'm going to highlight today is the differences between tagging manually versus auto-tagging, and of course, Chihuahuas versus Muffins. Now, we actually have a product as well. It's called Auto Classifier that actually allows us to also apply the metadata. We'll come back to how we do it when we actually go into that in the demo environment. And then the last thing that I just want to highlight just a bit is an example on why metadata is important. And actually, I'm just going to go ahead just a tad more. And so, when we take a look at this intranet, you see 6 things that a user can click on when they come into the intranet. It says what you need to know today, what others are viewing, your search history, recommended for you, clinical studies panel, and recently viewed. Well, all of those items are actually driven by metadata. And so when I talked about that LinkedIn profile being relevant, the beauty of the LinkedIn profile is that is all good relevant metadata. And that metadata that's been implied, that has been applied by an individual can be leveraged into how we actually then expose information to the end user. Now, before I go into the actual demo, which I'm going to go to in just a minute, I want to highlight about 5 or 6 key things, and I probably should put this on a slide and send it out to everybody. But when we're talking about tagging and improving search, metadata is probably the #1 thing that you can do to actually improve the relevancy of content and then help somebody actually navigate to what it is that they're looking for. Now, when we look at metadata, the problem is applying metadata is a behavior modification problem. You're never going to be able to get an end user to apply all of these metadata values that I just highlighted on a piece of content. Even if I did, the second problem is that tagging is subjective. So essentially, when Don tags a piece of content, I'm going to tag it much different than Michael Blumenthal. If I knew that I was going to tag something being about Michael, I would actually probably tag it as Bloomy, because that's one of my nicknames for him, versus he would actually tag it as Michael Blumenthal. Did you like that one, Michael? 3, consistency equals transparency. So if we apply consistent metadata, it's going to allow you to surface the right information the first time. 4th, explicit tagging versus implicit tagging. When I'm implicitly tagging, it means that I'm tagging something and I think that I'm potentially right, or somebody tagged it and we kind of hope that it's right, versus if somebody explicitly tags something, we know for sure that it is actually right. And then lastly, and probably most important as it relates to search, is that relevance is always subjective. So when we have metadata and we get results back, the result that comes back for me, the way I want to see the result is probably going to be different than it is for Michael Blumenthal or Bloomy. And so again, that's why we want to apply metadata. So as we talked about at the very beginning, the whole goal here is to talk about Chihuahuas and Muffins. And essentially what we're going to show is the uploading of images. And when we upload these images, what we're going to show is how Microsoft's cognitive services can automatically apply metadata to the content without the end user doing anything. What you saw me do right there was upload an image. All it says right here is Spark Don. Couple of neat things. So the first thing that the cognitive service image extractor will do is extract any text that's on the document. So that means these items right here, if I was looking for these, they're going to get picked up by the search index the next time the search index runs an incremental search. And then here you see all of the metadata that's actually going to get applied to this image without anybody doing anything. Literally all that happened is I uploaded the image just like I normally would. Now what we don't see are any tags that are actually going to get applied as explicit tags. And that's because this column right here is a column that's been put in by our company, leveraging our auto classifier technology that says, when we apply these tags, these are the only tags that are going to be used currently within the company. Now I could have set up so that all of those image labels actually get added as well. Again, that's up to you. But let's take a look at the image itself. And there you go. You see here's all the different verbiage that was extracted out. And again, end user didn't have to do anything. And then you saw the labels that were automatically applied by the end user, essentially not doing anything. Not bad.
So Azure's AI services were able to actually look at the pixels, do feature extraction where a feature is actually a character, put the characters together to form words and extract the words out of the image. They'd be able to pick off signs on images of the highway, things like that, and be able to capture that extracted text, right?
Yep. Again, any text. So think of it as an OCR for your image, but essentially it's just a service now. And so all you have to do is hook that into your SharePoint, And again, without anybody doing anything, you'd get the ability to extract the text out, and then you'd get what it thinks are the appropriate metadata values for that particular picture. And again, the one that I like here best is automotive ignition part. Now, it doesn't actually say spark plug, and in a perfect world, that's what we'd like it to say. But this is just letting you know that, from, again, a couple of years ago, to be able to do this is quite frankly magical.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go ahead and do another one. And so this time, we're going to grab another file. In this particular file, again, we talked about having the dogs, or chihuahuas versus muffins. This particular time, you see here that we have a set of labels that came back. There's no text on it, but you can see here that it was actually able to pick off, or again, implicitly apply what it thinks that particular image is. And if we go ahead and take a peek at the image, we see it's an angry chihuahua. And
yeah,
again,
let's go back in and see if the word ugly is there too. Not yet.
And again, that's where we want to go, right? It could be ugly, it could be angry. That is where it will essentially get at some point in time. But again, you just think years ago, I'm telling you, this was not even remotely feasible.
Where is the interface done in remote? What's the name of it?
So this is being done within the Azure Cognitive Service. It's essentially just a web service. It has what it does is it takes the image, runs it against essentially an image library, compares that image set with all of the other image sets that it has, and then comes back and says, here's what I think it is.
But the interface is done in a remote event receiver?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so this time I went ahead and uploaded another item. This is the top of a muffin. Again, so what we should see are muffin things. And so this time, when we look at the image label, we see baked goods, snack, cookies and crackers, cookie, food,
and snout.
Now, that's the beauty of this, right? So it's getting better, but it's really not 100% there.
Sure.
Where it's going to actually do it every time.
But is it useful? Sure, you can work with that.
But is it useful? Definitely. So let's go ahead and let's take one more, and let's see what happens. And again, some of these images, I actually know what's going to happen. Sometimes I don't. Honestly, I like it where just, to throw it in there and see what happens. Yeah. Okay, now, so this is another good example. And again, this is from, if you just have to understand, you're handing it off to a learning algorithm in the back end, because again, just think of a huge data cloud in the sky with a bunch of library of images. And so this particular time it came back with carnivore chihuahua, dogs, mammals, dog breeds. Let's look at the picture. Well, here's the problem, right? This was a composite of images. There's a plethora of different muffins in here. One of those muffins should have probably been picked up. And so somehow, some way, not only should it have the Chihuahua component on this, but it should also have the muffins. And so that's why when we're talking about tagging and we talk about implicit versus explicit, this is definitely more on the implicit side, right? This is where we think what this is, but we're not 100% sure. But to the point that you made, is it a lot better than where it is? Heck yeah. Can this information be used to automatically drive improved processes? It sure can. Now, what we do as a company is, again, we give you the ability to define that last step to say, okay, if we're going to apply a tag, which tags that we're going to apply. Now, because this particular term set is set up for petroleum exploration, none of the content that I uploaded is actually going to get uploaded. But if I uploaded an oil rig or something to that extent right now, that value might get recognized, and if it was in the vocabulary that we set up, that tag would actually get applied. But it would be using the auto tag extraction to determine whether it should actually get applied or not. And by doing that last step, what we're changing it from is implicit, whereas I think this is, to explicit, where we're saying, okay, if it's this, then we're going to go ahead and apply it because that's what we've defined as something that we actually care about in our vocabulary that we're looking to work with.
So you could be developing agents that are monitoring this library. An image comes into the library, it gets feature extracted, words come out that describe the picture, and then you can actually base your reactions on the words that are actually coming out and being extracted that describe that picture. That's
a great example. And so if you take it a step deeper, right? So once you understand the extraction process to begin with, then you can start thinking about, well, what if I'm looking at a car part and the car part is broken, right? Can it pick up that crack? And then to your point, if it sees the crack, can it send a kick off an event receiver that sends a note to the service repairman, hey, this frame is cracking, somebody needs to go out there and fix it before it actually fully fails, right? There's all sorts of powerful things that can happen from this, but what you're essentially seeing is the beginning of Microsoft's cognitive services to actually truly drive value without anybody doing anything. Because again, these first two pieces, the extracted text, the image labels, that is just the cognitive services out of the box. Now again, you have to set it up, but that's these particular pieces right here. I'll open this up to questions after this, but if this was good, potentially on the next one or the one after that, we could show the same process, but actually auto tagging video, because that's the next thread that we're going to be releasing. And again, we'll highlight the ability to automatically tag content in a video, much like I just showed with the image, but without going into it, video is actually even harder than images. But
yeah, it's multiple frames, sound, things like that. Don, fantastic demo. I have a feeling there are going to be a couple of follow-ups in next month and the month thereafter, showing the continued progress and what can be done with this inside SharePoint on-premise and up in the cloud. Thanks very much for the demo that you were able to provide us. I see that we're at 12:44, so the rest of the session is going to get devoted over to Ofer. Ofer, are you ready for me to hand over to you?
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
I'm going to momentarily take back the screen just to talk about the next one. And our next presentation is about RESTSharp, using the RESTSharp REST API with SharePoint by Ofer Gal from Novus Law. That's just to give you a little bit of flavor for what's going on there. Ofer, I'm handing off to you now.
Can you see my screen?
Still coming up. Hold on.
Oh, okay.
Not seeing it yet. And there we go. Continue, please.
Okay. This is a little nugget that I found to work in ASP.NET or .NET Core by itself, because let's go to the next one. Why do I even bother with that? .NET Core is, let's say, Microsoft's new way of doing things, and it's giving us all kinds of leaner and meaner ways of communicating and creating applications. It has advantage over .NET 4-point-something or anything like that, because it's multi-platform. It can work on Unix or Linux, I should say, and on the other one, we're not saying it, right? And it has smaller footprint. Right now, there's no client-side object model equivalent of the .NET 4-point-something. So how do we communicate with SharePoint? SharePoint also gives us REST API, which is kind of universal, and it's much easier to work with, if you ask me, in comparison with CSOM. But that's my own opinion. Also, there are a lot of other tools that you can use to query your endpoints on SharePoint. Postman is one of them, and we'll see later, Postman actually allows you to create a class or something like that directly on it. So what it is, it's an open source library that few geniuses wrote, and it's available as a NuGet package. And if you want to look at the source, you can get it from GitHub. There's also very good documentation. You can see where. And there's a little history to it. In order to do the object loading, if you will, or transferring, or making JSON into classes, they used to use the famous JSON.NET, but the newer version doesn't have it anymore. There's no dependency, and you can do all the deserializing and serializing just with it. So here is an example of how we use it. First of all, you start any .NET Core project. It could be console, it could be web, it could be your own REST API if you need to expose something. And when you design a GET endpoint, it's fairly easy to compare the return JSON from a tool like Postman or some other tool, and convert it to a class that will give you the results as they come from the REST endpoint. So one thing I should mention here, if you look at the ed header, we're all used to having application JSON and verbose OData or OData verbose. And I found out that if you don't add the OData verbose, you actually get much less load and much less unneeded items. And you can see that instead of the D something, you just get a value, and it's a collection or an array of data. So if you create yourself something that is called a value, and inside it's a list of whatever items you want to pick up, you can put it in your class, and it will bring it up right after you run the execute model SP response, and right away you have a list of your class showing up. So that makes it very, very handy, and you can see very short method can get you all the data you need. Next, when you do a post, SharePoint needs to have the form digest value. So you can, first of all, post to get that one using your credentials, and then use the form digest in another post header. You can see it here. Oops.
No worries, it'll come back. Just out of curiosity, Ofer, are you in Visual Studio Code as you're showing this right now, or is this Visual Studio?
No, this is
All
just
VS Code.
This is just PowerPoint, but it was taken from Visual Studio.
Visual Studio, okay.
But you're right. All this can be done in Visual Studio Code if you can, if you know how to work with Visual Studio Code and do the .NET something, you can basically achieve the same results.
Understood. Cool.
Okay, so I guess this is it. Any questions?
So you're seeing this as a very nice replacement of going with that REST interface through the RESTSharp API, and that's available out on GitHub, right?
Right.
And installing it and using it is as easy as simply running the install commandlet from Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code to add that assembly into your project. And Visual Studio Code and Visual Studio both know where to go and get those. They know where the common repositories are, like GitHub, etc., for getting those assemblies and automatically including them in a given project, right?
Correct. There's a install package RESTSharp in when it's called a NuGet application. Maybe I'm not pronouncing it right.
No, fine.
Very easy to use and very efficient.
I suspect that if you contribute your slide deck to the group, then we're going to make that available after the session today, and people are going to be very keen to snatch the little tidbits out of there. If I could ask you for a favor, it would be that while the screenshots show a lot of information that probably don't have the text as being actually editable, is there a way, is there a little sample that's available either on the RESTSharp GitHub site, or is there a little snippet, a little console app, even a journal file of some kind that actually has the code that you could provide to everybody?
Here it is. On the first slide, there is a place to go to my OneDrive, and it's public. Anybody can get it, and it has the application I used against some list that I actually, you'll see code there that I used to get the Northwind data out of the OData service. So
that sounds perfect.
That's a little.
That's a primer that everybody can go through because they all have access to that same kind of data set. Cool.
Correct. It's open to everyone.
Ofer, thank you very much for that particular presentation. Guys, I'm looking at the clock and I'm seeing 12:55. I'm changing presenter back to me only to run the very last slide of the day, which gives us just a couple of minutes to go into bring our own problems. And at this point, we've got 18 people attending today. That's actually a new record for the middle of the summer. I'm terribly pleased. Dina, if we could open up the mics and see if anybody wants to either take over the mic and ask questions or offer up some challenges that they're facing. I've tried really hard this session to look at the questions from Dennis, from Scott, that they were asking in the chat and answer and reply to everybody else. Has anybody got a particular problem that they're facing that they'd love to be able to share with the team and see if there's any ideas that we have? Scott, Patrick, Naveen, KZ, Jim, Evan, Dennis, anybody?
So if anybody wants to ask a question, just go ahead and raise your hand. I'm going to proceed to start unmuting people. Okay. But in the meantime, all right, you got Dan, Dave, Craig, you are now unmuted. Dennis, you are now unmuted. Let's see, we have Evan, we have Jim, Naveen. Looks like you had a question. You are now unmuted. Scott is unmuted.
Naveen, go ahead.
Oh, it looks like...
Oh, I'm looking. Will the recording be posted? Yes, the recordings are always posted. If you join the LinkedIn group, We'll be posting all of the details up there. That's our fastest way to get a hold of you because we don't have email addresses. We hope that you register for each of these, to attend the class, and then we get an email address that way.
Dennis posted a question. If I only have a few hours to spend per week, where within the Office 365 space do you recommend spending it?
Gosh, I have my own opinions. It would be in the area of Microsoft Flow and Microsoft Teams. Why? Chances are you're going to be working on a lot of projects. Microsoft wants to see Microsoft Teams and Microsoft Planner being used with all of its agile capabilities and its chat-centric collaboration coming to the forefront to provide a nimble, fluid environment for being able to drive projects. And while there's a lot of benefits to Agile, there's some techniques that I can share even in our next session where we add on what I would call more traditional waterfall techniques even into our Agile Microsoft Planner workboards, and you get the best of both worlds. You get the traceability in your projects that come with waterfall. You get the Agile nature and that highly visual interface that comes with Agile, and I'd be happy to present stuff like that. The flow, guys, is where I want you to focus this summer in Office 365 because that's where business process automation is occurring. And Microsoft has pulled out all of its guns. It's not Microsoft trying to draw you into Microsoft's world. Microsoft is connected to everything through Microsoft Flow, guys. You can create these equivalent event receivers that are monitoring Facebook, Twitter, Dropbox, every single competitor that's out there in the entire collaboration ecosystem. You can have links into, hooks into, and monitor what's going on, and then direct and actually react to changes in those environments from inside Flow, and then carry it all back inside SharePoint if you need to, or simply leave it up inside OneDrive or inside Dropbox. But the engine, the processing is happening inside that Microsoft Flow environment, that cloud-based service-oriented architecture environment. That is the wave of the future, guys. And SharePoint's dovetailing beautifully inside there, which means if you had only a limited amount of time, that's where you want to perfect your techniques. Any other questions that we've got going on? Everybody's doing a really good job of posting their questions. This is fantastic. Just signed up for LinkedIn this past hour. We created additions to the group. Great. Dan, thanks very much. Everybody help me even on LinkedIn. Tell us where else we should be trying to get. We got 250 members that got lost and don't know what happened to the Chicagoland SharePoint users group, and it's driving us crazy that we don't have those people back. Let's see if we've got a couple other questions coming in. Let's see. We use GitHub SharePoint Plus to do all the REST API operations. I'd have to look into that particular REST API, Naveen, but let's do a compare and contrast. I'll bring, in fact, we can open that up as another point of discussion for next month, is to say, here's what RESTSharp does, but here's what the SharePoint Plus does as far as REST APIs, and see if we can come up with strengths and weaknesses and help decide as a team where it might make sense to use one or the other, or if you're going to be going back and forth between the two.
What is the name of the other one?
I'm seeing it in this here. It's amkdn.github.io. It's SharePoint Plus is what it looks like coming in from Naveen. And it's posted in the questions. Ofer, I'll share that with you because it might be something useful that you'd want to explore, and then come back to the group and say, hey, here's what I found. I was working with Naveen because now we're members in this common users group, and here's what we found. There might be strengths on one side and weaknesses on the other. Let's go from there and take it from there. Any other questions that we've got? I see that it's 1:01. We're slightly over. It's not so much a BYOP session that we just had, but a lot of activity amongst all of the members. Scott, thank you. Naveen, thank you. Dennis, thank you. Dan, thank you. Ofer, thank you. Out to Don Miller for presenting, and potentially there's going to be more there. Keep watching. Thanks for that presentation. Ofer, great job on your presentation. Your first time presenting to the team on RESTSharp, which is a non-trivial topic. Job well done. Everybody, just as a reminder, let me move this out of the way and go to the last slide of the day. We're going to try to do more Power App stuff in the next session, more Flow in the next session, more Azure AI cognitive tools in SharePoint in August. Ralph is going to be coming back to talk about the MS Graph and to give us a sneak peek about the new SharePoint 2019 dev platform. It's August 15th. Until then, have a fantastic rest of your summer. Don't forget to spend a lot of time in the pools. Thanks for coming here. Sign up for LinkedIn, and we'll see you on August 15th. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.